Welcome to Percents Part 2. Let me set the timer for 10 minutes. We didn't have to use the timer last time because the first lesson was simple. Okay, so in the first lesson we talked about the relationship between fractions, decimals, or decimal fractions, and percents. And we said we have the fraction 18/100ths in decimal form. That would be 18/100ths because it's the tenths, hundredths place. And in percents, 18%, because the percent sign means denominator 100. Good. Now, today's skill is we're going to learn how to change a decimal to a percent. How to change a decimal to a percent. Let's take this decimal. $25/100ths. 25/100ths. Well, we know if this is 25/100ths and if the percent sign means denominator 100, then this would be 25%. Another way a typical way that you do it would be you take whatever the decimal is and you multiply it by 100. Now, since I'm multiplying by 100, I can put the two zeros out here because the zeros don't mean anything. So I just put the zeros and then I go 5 times 1 is 5 and 1 times 2 is 2. And then we know when we're multiplying decimals we have to count the decimal places. 1, 2 decimal places. So 1, 2, and I get 25, and so I can get rid of the zeros. So the decimal 25/100ths is equal to 25%. Now, a simpler way of looking at all of this in changing decimals to percent. Anytime you change a decimal to a percent, all you do is you move the decimal place 2 places to the right. So I have 43. I move the decimal here, 1, 2, and I put a percent sign. Since there's no other numbers following, I don't have to put a decimal at the end. So 43 is equal to 43%. Now, if I had the decimal let's take this. Now this is 43 10/100,000ths. So this is 43 thousandths. So to change any decimal to a percent, I move the decimal point 2 places. 1, 2. So this would be 4.3%. 4.3%. I don't keep the zero because the zero, if I had a zero here, it would be silly because the zero doesn't mean anything. Okay, let's take a look at another one. Suppose I had this 16 2/3 as a decimal. 16 2/300ths this would be, and I want to change that to a percent. Well, the rule is I move the decimal place 2 places to the right. So I'd move 1, 2, and 2/3%. Since this is not a whole number, I don't put the decimal point because it's a fraction. If this were 165 thousandths, if the decimal was 165 thousandths, and I changed it, I would move the decimal point two places, 1, 2, and since this is a whole number, I would have to have the decimal place there. I do not have to put the decimal here because it's a fraction. Sometimes I might have a problem like this. Three-tenths, and I need to change that to a percent. Well, I know to change any decimal to a percent, I move the decimal place two places. 1, 2. But there's no number here, so I would put a 0. So, .3 would become, this decimal would become 30%. And the reason for that is this decimal is 3/10. So if I wrote it in fraction, 3/10, and I changed it to a fraction that had a denominator of 100, 10 times 10 would give me 100, so 3 times 10 is 30, 30 hundredths. And we know this percent sign means denominator 100, so this is equal to 30%. So let me review that skill again. We might have a decimal like this, 7/10. And if I want to change it to a percent, I move the decimal place two places to the right, 1, 2. But there's nothing there, so I put a 0. So 7/10 is equivalent to 70%. Quick review. To change any decimal to a percent, you move the decimal places two places to the right. 16 hundredths, 16%. I moved the decimal two places. Since there's no number that follows, I do not have to put a decimal. Seventeen and 1/2 hundredths, decimal. Move the decimal place two places. Since this is a fraction, I do not put the decimal. If this were 177 thousandths, and I moved it two places to the right, 1, 2, it would be 17 and 7/10%. Finally, if I have a number like this, 7/10, and I move it two places, there's nothing there, so I have to put a 0. So 7/10 equals 70%. Excellent. Excellent. Let me put some problems up for you, and we'll have you put the DVD on hold. Actually, you know what? I'm going to run out of time, so what I'll do is I'll make percents part 3 be the problems. How to change a decimal to a percent. So we'll do, so again, to review, to change any decimal to a percent, you move the decimal two places to the right, 1, 2, and put the percent sign. Okay, so when we come back, then we will have percents part 3, and it'll be examples that I will put up on the board for you to work. Great, thank you. This is an easy skill here. Just always move it two places to the right.